A tragedy of the commons exists when there are individual incentives to act against the collective interest. Peeing in a swimming pool is a good example of a tragedy of the commons. If you pee in a swimming pool, the pee quickly disperses through the water. If you are the only one peeing in the pool, it has little effect on you. If 100 other people use the pool, and many of them pee in the water quality is degraded, so that all swimmers are affected. The urine interacts with the chlorine to produce noxious chemicals that irritate skin, eyes, and mucous membranes. Although each individual would prefer to swim in clean water and would be willing to not pee in the water in exchange for this benefit, the individuals have no incentive to not pee in the water. Whether or not everyone else pees in the water, your additional pee will have little effect on the water quality, and thus it will have little effect on you. The result is that everyone pees in the water, and everyone suffers from degraded water quality. The tragedy of the commons is very similar to the prisoner's dilemma. The tragedy of the commons is a game played between each individual and all other individuals. The prisoner's dilemma is a game played between two individuals. In both games, the players have an incentive to defect, to do something that isn't nice to the other players, resulting in an outcome that is worse for all players. These two games define the fundamental problem of social organization, creating cooperation between selfish individuals. The tragedy of the commons explains why socialism fails. In the tragedy of the commons, the effects of individual actions are socialized. They are aggregated first and then distributed. The aggregation of the effects removes the individual's incentive to either be productive or to not be destructive. There are two kinds of socialism, top-down and bottom-up. Top-down socialism is imposed on the collective by the state, and bottom-up socialism is imposed on the collective by the individual. In top-down socialism, the state confiscates the products of individual labor and distributes them to the collective. This reduces the incentive to be productive. In bottom-up socialism, the individual distributes the costs of his actions to the collective. This reduces the incentive to not be destructive. The tragedy of the commons also explains why democracy often fails. In a democracy, individual votes are aggregated to produce a collective result, an elected government or social policy. Each individual vote has little impact on the outcome, and the results are distributed to individuals regardless of how they vote, just as everyone swims in the same water, regardless of whether they pee in it. Let's say there is a referendum on a social policy that has two outcomes, A and B. Outcome A would cost you and everyone else $10,000, and outcome B has no effect on you or anyone else. In this scenario, how much is your vote worth? Well, it depends on the probability that your single vote will change the outcome of the election. It is impossible to say what that probability is, but it is usually very small. Let's say there is a 1 in a million chance that your vote will change the outcome. In that case, the expected utility of voting for B versus A is 1 penny. Your vote is worth 1 penny to you. Even though the difference between the two outcomes is worth $10,000 to you, your vote is only worth a penny to you, because there is a very low probability that it will affect the outcome. It is generally not worth voting if your intention is to change the outcome of an election. What is worse You might actually prefer to vote for A instead of B for psychological reasons. In this example, if there is a psychological payoff that exceeds 1 penny to you, such as maintaining ideological consistency, you might prefer to vote against your interests. This can happen on a large scale, so that the population as a whole votes for something that is harmful to everyone. In fact, this happens very often. Your political views are probably not selected for the function of choosing good social policy or good governments. You don't really have any effect on those things, so why would your brain generate a model that is good at that function? The ordinary person does not understand how society works and does not care, because his choices have little effect on society as a whole. Instead, his political views have a different function, that of social signaling. People love politics because it is a social game, and we are social animals. Playing this game activates our social emotions, and can even become an addiction, because it provides us with emotional gratification. Political views have a number of social functions. They are used to fit into a group and signal group identity. They are used to create a persona that others find appealing, to make one appear to be a good person. They are a means of seeking approval and status. They are used to justify rent-seeking. They are used to justify hatred and sadism. The ordinary person's political views are a form of other deception and self-deception. They have nothing to do with solving social problems. For politicians to deceive the public must also be engaged in deception and self-deception. Politicians intuitively understand that the public are fakers, liars, and hypocrites, and so they manipulate public opinion by providing people with the images and ideologies they can use for social signaling, rather than practical solutions to social problems. The politician is the bringer of hope and change, and you can get that printed on a bumper sticker or a t-shirt. In the game of politics, everyone is deceiving everyone, including themselves. Because individuals do not directly pay the costs of their political decisions, most people use political ideologies as social signaling devices, and then vote based on those ideologies to maintain ideological consistency. And that is why democracy is a tragedy of the commons.